So the third element of Mars is resistance training, aka weightlifting or hitting the gym or whatever people call it. Why is it so important?
I think first and foremost is to stop something that's called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wastage that we experience as we age. And it comes across in strength training, can come across in, or resistance training can come across in various different forms. It could be using barbells, using body weight, lifting dumbbells, resistance bands. There's various ways that you can strength train and resistance train, but I think there are many benefits, but one of the main ones is sarcopenia, and as we age, that to stop that muscle wastage as we get older.
And of course the problem with losing muscle is that's what supports the joints, that's what supports mobility. And I've said for years and years that the two things you really want in your old age is movement and mind, isn't it? You know, M&Ms. Yeah. We've got Mars, so let's have M&Ms as well now. So movement and mind, if you can't move, life, there's no point getting to 120 if you can't move. And if we don't look after those muscles, they won't look after the joints. Is that a fair way of looking at it? Or?
Yeah, I would say so, and definitely. And I think what you're trying to prevent is not just there's obviously lots of metabolic functions that muscle has, but when you're talking about movement, it's not being fragile. So sarcopenia is definitely one of those, and also it helps prevent, therefore, osteopenia, which is obviously bone density loss as well, at least to osteoporosis. But you're trying to become anti-fragile. You want to be able to be as mobile as you can and as robust as you can for as long as you possibly can and within your life, and that's longevity. I mean, if you were looking at it in two sort of ways, you could say that you've got healthy aging and you've got unhealthy aging. If you end up in a circumstance where you're slightly following a more unhealthy aging distribution, so you become a slightly different phenotype, then it tends to follow a line of sort of unhealthy aging, immobility, disability, death. Yeah. You see, it tends to follow a line like this. Yeah. So the first part of that is trying to not age unhealthily. Yeah. So you're trying to be non-fragile. As soon as you get on that, as soon as you start to become fragile, at least you're being immobile, and at least disability is just around the corner. So what you're looking to do is to maintain this healthy aging, keep good muscle strength, good muscle health, good muscle quality, and then you'll just live this long, healthy life. And one day, you've not got this 20-year decline, which we see all the time. And so muscle health is huge in that.
Is it for everybody, James?
I think it's important to just make the most of your life, and you things that you don't do every day, which is why you need to do weight training for it. Like we should walk enough. But actually, some of the muscles you are using every day, other ones you're not. You notice it with your parents. At a certain stage, they'll a pot of jam, they'll give it to you to open because they've lost that. The strength, the weight. So I think it is so important to just keep on top of the muscles that you don't use every day. Yeah. And the fact that so many of the modern devices are energy saving, but that stops you doing the same movement. How often do we lift our hands above our heads to get? It's just there's not so many things that we lose because we do the same movements all the time. But the good thing about weight training and resistance training and postural work is that improvements are really quick and significant. And I've yet to test it, and it's too late for me to test it, but studies have been, they think, as a theory, that if you lift your kid every day above your head, from the day they're born, you'll still be able to do it when they're 18.
Right, okay, yeah.
So every day for 18 years, so that's, 365 times each year, that no matter what size they are, that when they've grown up, you will still be able to do that. Obviously, you've got to know that when they're zero to test the theory, so no one can disprove it, but that's the way that your body will grow into strength. In the same way as Christian was saying, if you don't use it, it slides back down the other side.
Yeah. And I guess everything comes back to ancestral precedents, and go back 10,000 years ago, which is sort of one page in the book of life and evolution, we were constantly having to lift up heavy things. I think even thinking back to my grandmother bringing back the shopping from the supermarkets, I don't think I could pick up the 6 bags in each hand like she used to, but they had to do it. And that today, well, we don't even go shopping, we have it delivered most of the time. So we have to consciously then go out of our way to work the muscles more.
Yeah.
And there's a few sort of really key fundamental movement patterns that we should all be focusing on. And there's typically sort of the Power 5, hinge, squat, push, pull, and core. And I think most of us aren't, when we strength train, resistance train, aren't adhering to those 5 sort of main movement patterns. And I think if you can focus on those 5, you're hitting all the muscles. It's multi-joint. You're hitting. You're working the ankles, knees, and hips. And it's a recipe for longevity if you're doing those type of movement patterns versus exercising and focusing on muscle parts.
Yeah.
Because then what happens is often some areas get missed because we always focus on the things that we might see in the mirror. So for guys, typically it's like, oh, okay, I'll work on my chest and my abs, and not so much back there. And in my experience, mostly females want to work on sort of, and it tends to be this sort of age that we're living in, is sort of glutes and hamstrings and stuff like that, and more legs. And my experience of working in many gyms over the years, there's typically guys will skip leg day, and you've probably heard the expression, don't skip leg day.
Yeah.
But if we can focus on movement patterns over muscles, I think that's a much safer prescription for longevity. Training,
my
training
own routine that I put in the back of the book, must admit I don't do core because I think I incorporate into quite a lot of the others, but always a hinge, one set of hinge every time in the gym, one always of a squat, one of a push-ups. We talked about push-ups earlier, how everybody can do a push-up.
Yeah.
James teaches in one video on the app against the wall,
Yeah.
and then also I think in the app James then said we get on the bath as you get stronger,
Yeah.
then eventually get on your knees and do a press-up.
Yeah.
Then eventually do a full press up.
Yeah.
Then the super fit can put their feet on a chair and then decline like that. And then eventually up against the wall. I mean, like a press up is like an exercise for everybody.
That's right.
From athlete to starting out.
What you're describing there is that we've already touched on is you're looking at those, how the human body has evolved to function. So you're looking at, and everything we talk about comes back to that. So how does each individual muscle function? So you have an appreciation of that. But then we understand that all the muscles work together as synergies. So you've got an intramuscular type of coordination, which is just the individual muscle group, but appreciating that all these muscle groups and tendons and joints all work together as synergies, and that's like intermuscular coordination that you're thinking about there. And then what you look to do is with the exercises that we're describing, is you're looking to obviously use the most amount of muscle you possibly can over the most effective range of motion. And if you nail that process, because this is the great thing about knowing how the human body works now, you can nail the exercise you do, and over time that will allow you to lift the most weight.
Yes.
You see, so you can stress your body appropriately over time. And again, because we naturally decline in strength as we age, the stronger you can keep yourself, the more youthful you are. You're maintaining.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, so it's the same as if you're developing an aerobic system. The better aerobic system you have, the more youthful your aerobic system is, because it will naturally decline over time. It's the same with strength. So you want to maintain this level of muscle health. And the one thing I think is huge on muscle health is that it almost directly is relevant to your metabolic health status.
Agreed.
So if you, just by looking at what you can pick up, for example, and the quality by which you move because of this, or the quality of your strength, or how strong you are in certain positions, etc., you can always determine people's metabolic health status off of that. And interestingly, things like if you carry a high visceral fat, so visceral fat's the fat that's around your organs, okay, it's right around your midriff, but visceral fat's not just here around the organs and abdomen, etc. It's also in between individual muscle fibers, so it seeps in between fibers, and there's all sorts of inflammatory processes that kick in then, and it manifests itself in an inability to contract your muscles properly, which means you can't pick things up the same.
Yeah.
So helps reduce your visceral fat, but your nutrition is really important, and start to build that strength over time with those key exercises. And what you find is that very quickly your muscle health and muscle quality improves, and you get very, very strong. And there's your anti-aging mechanism right there.
And if you buy into my tree of how all metabolic illnesses, from strokes to heart disease, obesity, certain causes of Alzheimer's, probably the biggest cause, certain cancers, are all related to insulin resistance. To keep the cells more sensitive, so the opposite, so to try and avoid all those nasty things from happening, all those chronic illnesses, the more muscle mass you have, the muscles don't need insulin to take up the sugar. They'll take it in on their own as a free ride. So now we don't need so much insulin, which helps prevent hyperinsulinemia. So just having more muscle will reduce your risk of at least 4 of the 5 most common causes of early death in the UK.
Exactly.
So it just mustn't be underrated. But then where do you start out? And James, talk about some of the things you were telling me. Well, we've got it on the app, haven't we? The picking up the cans of beans, the just stepping up and down on steps. Talk us through some of the basics.
No, I think it's almost the movements that you don't do often enough, or you avoid, or have been phased out through energy-saving devices. And actually, you could choose to put the cans on the top shelf rather than have them in the easiest height, and so you're actually unloading them up there, and every time you're reaching up, we think we put our hands above our heads so rarely. You actually don't bend down enough to do stuff. So I think it's incorporating exercise into life, as I said previously, is always take the stairs up and down rather than taking the lift, and standing up and sitting down burns 2 calories. So you can incorporate it into there, and then once you've got that and enjoying it and seeing actually that's becoming easier, then you can then progress to doing different exercises and incorporate actually then, rather than thinking, okay, first thing I'll do, I've got to, resistance training is weight training, I've got to go to the gym. That's 2 or 3 steps away. You just need to actually just make your life easier and better for longer. That's the point of resistance training.
Yeah. I mean, body weight, we always say, in most books you read, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger will say that body weight exercises probably trump everything. So just doing squats, on the chair, simple press-ups against the wall if you're just starting out. Simple body weight exercises probably trump most things. And then, your resistance bands are the great way to even for athletes to stay healthy. And then, of course, you can progress to the gym if you want to progress, but you can certainly build loads of muscle without going anywhere near it.
And also the thing about using the body weight, it gives you a chance to do the exercises correctly, which builds up the little muscles, which means when you do progress, you're not then, there's no point going to the gym and doing the exercise badly because you're not working the muscles that you want to work. So actually by starting off very light on body weight, it means you can get the movement right, which then means when you do progress, you're working what you want to work.
I mean, interesting question I never thought to ask before, Christian. The broomstick exercises, I think of them for stance and getting posture right, but done properly, especially at time under tension, doing it slowly. Is that in itself for many people resistance exercise?
Absolutely. I mean, that is sometimes their session. And I did it again with being that N=1 that I am, same as what you always try, little experiments on yourself or case study and everything. I actually did an experiment where I built up to a max squat and then didn't squat at all for 2 months and only did the postural work and spent time under tension, lots of time holding to positions with the broomstick, sometimes above my head and in different positions and holding different positions within that, doing it on a daily basis almost. And to the point of where I almost became indefatigable within those positions, and went back to my squat 2 months later and lifted a heavier squat. See, so I actually maintained, because I'd done such a volume of this work, it was fascinating for me. I felt brilliant on it as well. I maintained the other exercises stuff, but I absolutely loved the fact that it was like that, because it meant I could even simplify some of the other things that we were prescribing, and and be able to know that we're prescribing something that absolutely would strengthen people over these times. Because again, it's this sort of minimal stress on the body, but over time it adds up. And whereas if I was squatting some heavy squats, I would have spent less time squatting and then had recoveries in between. See, so it was fascinating to have this sort of thing. See, but now we see this. This is why people feel this when they do it. And so what they do is the first thing they do when they come is pick the broomstick up. It's the first thing they'll do because they don't want to not do that. Because they're thinking, well, if at least I've got that in, this is a pretty important thing. This, especially once you learn to spend some time doing it. So it's been really interesting.
So you can start out from the chair, as in just getting up and down from the chair, burns calories. You can press them against the wall. You can get your cans of tomatoes and put them up in the cupboard. We can do all our sort of stance exercises, broomstick exercises, and we still haven't gone anywhere near a gym.
No.
And obviously the exercise bands that we send out with all our 12-week programs are absolutely fantastic as well. Okay, one of my favourite ones, and I prefer this over any other squat, I do a wall squat. Because of a wall squat, as long as I know my feet are right, my back's right, I've got my time now. And I can really measure my improvement. And it hurts, and it shakes, and I've done nothing, no weights, no expense, just a wall.
Yeah.
And it's nice to throw in what you're talking about right there is isometric exercises where you're just holding, and that's what you touch on, isometrics and eccentrically loading muscles. And I think a lot of people at the gym, I typically see guys do this when they're lifting weights, is they spend all their energy focusing on lifting the weight up, and then they sort of dump the weight down. I'm doing a bicep curl here. So lifting that weight up and then dumping it down, when actually the fatigue and the soreness that you get the day after is actually from eccentrically loading your muscles, which on a bicep curl would be the way down, the lengthening of the muscle.
Yeah.
But as we discussed, it's all about time under tension, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so even if I totally agree, and even if you're looking to push someone on further, they got to the stage where they might spend some time, say, under a squat bar or a safety squat bar or something like that. What I'll always do with them is force them to control eccentrically like they do. They'll go down to a pin height that we've determined that's suitable for them, and they'll pause on the pin to force them to hold isometrically, and before they're allowed to come up. So we still progress them in that way. We always squat for posture and for control of the muscles. It's what we do all the time. So we standardise it like that, because I think that's a really important thing to do, and it prevents any kind of, again, you're teaching people how to concentrically, eccentrically and isometrically contract the muscles. That's really what you're trying to do. And the strength transfer into everyday life is what you're trying to get from all these exercises. Yeah. It's an amazing transfer, and that's what we're trying to get, transfer in everyday life.
Yeah. I grew up playing the saxophone at 9 years old. My dad used to give me lessons every single day, and I got reasonably okay on the sax. But I wanted to play guitar. And so I self-taught myself the guitar, and I was doing like 3 times more hours on the guitar than the sax, because sax is what my dad told me to do, guitar is what I wanted to do. And I always remember I was about 19, and I went and did a gig with my dad, and he went, brilliant sax playing, and then I played the guitar. He said, you're pretty crap at that, aren't you? And I went, yeah, I never quite mastered it. And he went, no, you know why? He said, because with the sax, I made you practice properly, and then you add in good onto good onto good, therefore you get progressively better. Yeah. You started off crap on the guitar, you practiced lots of doing it wrong, and therefore you're still crap now, you can't do anything right. This is the same with exercise, isn't it? You know, if you go straight in and you're throwing the weights around, you're going to hurt yourself, or undoubtedly you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to pull muscles. But if you don't train to do it right in the first place, then you will never get stronger. So with all your postural advice through the courses
this is what James has described there when he's talking about picking up, that's what you're describing as progressive overload. That's what you're describing. So you just progressively overload over time. So you've got your natural weight there every day with your child. Yeah. See, when you pick your child up over your head, that's why it would be a very slow progressive overload over an 18-year period of time, which is what we're discussing here, is how can I train every day in a way that would allow me to be stronger in 20 years' time? Yeah. It's like I can still do it. Yeah. So good experiment, that.
Well, and somebody said the other day, I was saying, well, when you do a shoulder press, you've got to lock out at the top. And they went, right. No, that's not what they say on the internet. On the internet, they say, don't lock out at the top because you pause. And yet, you taught me that if you don't lock out, then you're going to trap,
Or you can do. You can impinge your tendons in your shoulder, So, and you can't impinge your shoulders if you reach up with your shoulders
Yeah.
up to your ears. Yeah. So yeah.
So
you
back
know.
to why are you training in the first place? Why are you training your muscles? If you want to train them to be the next bodybuilder, probably go somewhere else, but it probably won't do any good for longevity.
Yeah.
I mean, the body doesn't want mass muscles.
No.
We look at the
Yeah,
bodybuilders
yeah.
and they go, oh, they're not
Yeah.
a good example of health.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
No. Or powerlifters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or powerlifters.
There's only so long you can do it for, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly.
You want
yeah.
muscles to support your frame and longevity, not
Yeah.
impede living a good long life.
What we're thinking about here is about being strong. That's what you
Yeah.
really want to have good strength, but you want to have good strength compared to your body weight or BMI. That's what
Yeah.
you really want to have. So it's not about how strong can I possibly get absolutely,
Yeah.
because if you want to do that, you could just go to become a powerlifter and put on, just by eating a horrific diet that was just full of poor, carbohydrates everywhere. And you could end up making yourself the strongest. If I wanted to make myself lift the heaviest I could, I'd make myself 20 stone. Because the heavier mass moves mass, so I'd just
Yeah.
make myself bigger.
Yeah.
But really what you're looking to do is how you interact with your environment every day. And I think that one of the things that I'll monitor is lean body weight to weight ratio. So
Yeah.
I want to have a good amount of muscle mass for your size, but we also look at the muscle health quality. And so being able to pick things up and linking that into your body weight or your BMI is really important, because then you can track that over longer time scales. You can also actually age standardise that as well, because it's got an age standardising tables and stuff that you can actually use for that, which is good. So you can see how strong you are for your age.
Yeah.
And I think these things are really good to monitor, because those are health tools. This is like
Yeah.
a health thing. It's not and it gives you some little targets to try and maintain and stuff like that without ever having to stress too much. It's about, like we've talked about before, making those adaptations with the least amount of stress possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, going back to those measurements that you're talking about, you can do it by age, but also, like you said earlier, that weight moves weight. So the higher your BMI, you might go, all I can do, I don't know, I can bench press X amount, but if your BMI is high, well, in fact, if you're then exercising and losing weight, if you can maintain that muscle
Exactly.
and drop your weight, you're now stronger than you were before,
Exactly.
because you've got less weight moving the weight.
And much healthier.
Yeah.
And much more youthful.
Yeah.
And you look much more like one of those ancestral humans that you tend to view an ancestral human as, somebody that's
Yeah.
lean and muscular and can just move all day, and interacts with the environment all day, rather than look like, the heaviest things I've ever picked up in my life was because I actually did train myself towards a powerlifter type of physiology, purely so that I could speak to powerlifters about it, or speak to people about it. So you just start to do it, and you can really pick up some heavy things.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, that it wasn't health, And this is a different thing once you start to get leaner and stronger and stuff, and it's much more. That's much where all the longevity comes from.
Yeah.
And it transfers into everything you do.
Now, building muscle to support your joints and longevity is about breaking down the muscle first, so a catabolic process, and then in the hope that when it repairs better than before. So just as in other forms of exercise, recovery is an important part, but there's a lot of confusion, and even a lot of things we write. It's one area of all the things we write, and people look at it and go, well, sometimes you say you need to train once a week, sometimes 2 times a week. Is there a simple answer to how you measure when you should do your next lot of resistance, or is it depending on what type of resistance you did, what intensity, how long you did it, what weights you were doing, or is it just really a case of forgetting everything we write and everybody else writes and just listen to the body? I don't know the answer to this one.
There's so many different variables, I think, that go into it. Typically, when I design my clients' 12-week sort of programs, I'll start them off at 2 strength sessions a week. And take them across sort of 3 phases. So phase 1 would be weeks 1, 2, 3, 4. Phase 2 would be weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8. And phase 3 would be 9, 10, 11, 12. And then across those 3 phases, we have what we spoke about, progressive overload, and there's loads of different ways you can do it, whether it means increasing the weight slightly, or increasing the reps, or lower reps and higher weight, or less rest, supersets, trisets, drop sets, giant sets, all this kind of stuff. There's loads of different variables you can do. But yeah, I think there's so many different variables that come into it. But I would start off sort of 2 strength sessions, and getting a good sort of 1 to 2 aerobic sessions in there as well, and then building up to maybe 3 strength sessions as the time goes on, as you reach sort of week 6 weeks.
And it depends on the person himself. I mean, I've got one guy who's a full example of how amazing sometimes some of those bigger compound exercises can work for people, who would only come in once a week, and he's 71 years old and has Parkinson's, and he would, let's say for example, if we did a deadlift, so he would only deadlift once every 2 weeks, and when he came in, we started off with about I don't know, 40 kilograms, something we built up to on that day. But if you fast forward about 8 or 9 months' time, he deadlifted 140 kilograms at age 71 with Parkinson's, deadlifting once every 2 weeks. How much does he need? I could have trained him 3 times a week and he did the same. He could have done it. It's really difficult to know. There's obviously, I think in general, it's part of this full health thing that we're doing here. And you're following with everything a stress recovery adaptation cycle. I think in the main, you're always looking to progress yourself or maintain. But as we're getting older, if I took myself as an example, that what I'm aiming to do is to find the way to do the least I possibly can, but still get stronger, which might mean I might stay the same strength, but I'm stronger for my age. So there's a bit of that going on, see? Yeah. So it's a little bit of a challenge to yourself, etc. But it's hard to know exact volumes and things like that. One of the things you see, and James will know this within athletics and things like that, is that people don't take a chance in that in a performance capacity, and they'll just hammer you as much as they can. You see, so the more you can do, the more you can tolerate, you know. So, but it's handy to have some of these little monitoring tools, and one of the things that I've been developing myself is ways to monitor the effect of strength training. So we can do that using heart rates and overnight resting heart rates, things like that, which has been really cool thing to watch. I've been looking at my overnight resting heart rate, but also picking up sub-maximal lifts for a lower number of reps each day and seeing how I feel. You know, again, back down in that 70% range, but only moving for a single rep, and actually thinking, okay, this is part of a recovery day here, and having a little range to work in that's very sub-maximal, but seems to be having quite profound effects, again, over time. So it's hard for people to see in the distance, see 3 months in advance, but if people get there too quickly, they'll be 6 months in, they're doing the same thing as they were doing 3 months before that, and they just not realise that. But if you just continue this if you're prepared to take your time and view it as human movement, and just, you know, take your time over time and sort of follow that stress recovery adaptation cycle, it's amazing how the body responds over time.
Are we saying that if you went in at a real big hard session, you got somebody in and they want to be pushed really hard, then that might be a week before they come in again, like the gentleman with the Parkinson, who I was there and filmed, you know, while he was doing it, which was tears in my eyes. I mean, amazing. Yeah, just amazing to see this guy doing it. But then, like James says, you know, you might be just starting out and you are doing press-ups against the wall. Well, you might wake up the next morning and that might have been too much for you, so don't exercise the next day. But if you wake up and you've got no aches, well then maybe try some more against the wall, and if you wake up the next day still got no aches, maybe try and get down onto the bath and do a bit more.
And if your idea is always to keep it sub-maximal and within a certain range of intensity, etc., and you can do it the following day, for example, that's maybe exactly where you want to be. Something that you can actually do every single day. You could repeat what you did the day before. You can take this. You can test it every now and again, once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, to see where you are, see what the adaptations have been, and move it on in that way. We definitely regard this. Well, I definitely regard the situation where if I can't do what I've done the day before that day, I've probably worked hard the day before. You see, I probably have. So I've definitely had some sort of stress. So it's done something. You know. So
it's interesting that you say that, because I've worked with so many clients and their aim is to get that soreness the next day. It's almost like a badge of honour. So sore the next day, and they sit down on the loo and they're like, oh, my legs are so sore, I can't possibly do a session today because my legs are so sore, or climbing up the stairs, I can't do it. And it's sort of changing the script, so that we're not training all the time to completely exhaust ourselves so that we can't do it again, because then you're not going to be able to do that for long term, and it's not sustainable.
Wouldn't it be quite cool to still live your day and the following day and live?
Yeah.
You know, the
And
way you want to
perform.
live and perform. Just do stuff on a daily basis. Like if you trash yourself, it can, you know, you leave yourself a few days before you can do anything else. You're not much good to the world in those other days.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I try and only train 20 minutes, and I've got my exercise. I rotate in five sessions. Sometimes I do them over a week, sometimes over 2 weeks. But so I have to go time to failure. Yeah, because if I don't push myself hard, I might not be training for another 3 days. And I'm still trying to do it in 20 minutes.
oh, so you're still doing that stress recovery adaptation
Yeah.
process, see?
Yeah.
So sometimes you can, you see, and that's what I'm saying, but then you'll leave enough time before you could do that again, you know?
And James, I know you've talked a lot on other videos about how, you know, the Olympics recovery now is regarded as important as the low, you know, the rebuilding, the anabolic bit, the rebuilding the muscles, rest and recovery as important sometimes as the exercise itself.
Yeah, I think that's the big, talking top end, but the big difference between the results of the 96 Olympics and 2000 Olympics was, you know, the National Lottery funding came on board, so athletes didn't have to work. So it would be resting between training sessions. And the training didn't increase that much, just the recovery and, you know, being able to rest between, but then also not have to think about work as well helped. It was not because suddenly they trained 20% better, they rested more, and that's where, you know, overtraining syndrome is also under recovery syndrome. So it's, you know, it's the same thing. It's about resting as much as training, and if you can't, you know, and building it into the whole, I spoke about the whole package of, you know, the aerobic movement, resistance, nutrition, everything is all about, you know, what you've got time to do. So it's actually, if you're going to, you know, is it 1 or 2 or 3 resistance sessions? If you've been coming from none, 1 is a big step forward. So take that, enjoy it, and then see, you know, what works for you, and then keep moving on.
Again, it's this intensity, volume distribution. So, you know, I'm enjoying at the moment a way of training which allows me to strength train every day, but the intensity is not high. So it's low intensity strength training, and then every now and again I'll do it intense. You know, there's different ways to do it.
Yeah.
You can have situations where you do intensity other days,
Yeah.
or there'll be intensity on your upper body one day and then lower body another day.
Yeah.
But then that's giving other parts of your body time. There's not necessarily one way. I
Yeah.
think that's what we're saying. It's everybody's slightly different.
And
But
when
it
the video-
follows that distribution
Yeah.
of you'll only be able to do a certain amount of intensity with a certain volume, you know, and it's about how that adaptation then from that. So, and you'll just build it over time.
And then over the years, I mean, do 12-week programs, but over the years, then start to mix it up, because if the body gets used to doing one exercise the same way, the benefits start to diminish. Because
different
the
ways.
brain goes, I know what you're about to do to me. You know, I don't want you to push me that hard. So sometimes, the way I vary it, sometimes if my brain yesterday, I did, I don't know, dips, and I did it really, really quick. Today, I'm going to just do 3 of them really slow,
Yeah.
put a bit of weight around the middle,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
just, my brain's going, I
There
don't
you
know
go.
what, I didn't expect
Different
that.
thing, yeah. So it's just stress.
Yeah.
You're putting an extra stress on the system, and you're forcing an adaptation.
And that's typically, you know, that's what we see across that 12-week program, is that those 3 phases and that new stimulus, so that adaptation that happens every 4, 8, 12 weeks, whatever, you know.
So there's lots of different ways, yeah. It's what's really cool about the body, you know. You're aiming for the same thing.
And with Mars movement, aerobics, resistance, stance, somebody just starting out, maybe they're obese, they realise they've got to start, you know, exercising a little bit for longevity. Am I right to say to some of them that before you start, back to in the other videos you've talked about, that if you've got fatty liver, which tends to come when you've got central obesity, when you've got visceral fat, some of the enzymes that releases can damage the joints. Therefore, don't try and jog before you can walk. You know, don't try and even do any aerobics. Actually, just start doing James's press-ups against the wall, lifting some cans. And if you do enough of them, that in its own right for you as an individual might be aerobic, because you might find that you're putting your heart rate up sufficiently.
Exactly, yeah. You're getting obviously everything in one thing there.
Yeah.
So you're eating properly, you're strength training, which for you is quite a stress, even if it's body weight, and there's obviously an aerobic component comes into that. Strength training can be really aerobic. It can be really aerobic. I mean, you can be way into above 70, 75, 80% of your max heart rate just by just doing something that's body weight.
Yeah.
And if you pick up something really heavy and maybe pick it up 5 times, for example, something like a deadlift or something like that, my heart rate's been well over 90% of its max by picking things up off the floor multiple times. That's quite amazing, really. It's not, you're not doing a run.
Yeah.
So it's that level of stress you're putting on the system, and you can all these different physiological systems that we've got in the body, you can tax them all if you just get that type of exercise right. But the body weight stuff done for reps will do that, of course.
And I think another interesting thing about bodyweight training is it allows you to expand your movement library from doing bodyweight training. And I'm not saying that machines at the gym are bad, because they are great for sort of isolating certain areas of the body, but going back to sort of training movement patterns over muscles. But yeah, I think I've completely lost my train of thought now. Yeah.
Well, I'm not personally so fond of machines myself anyway either.
Yeah.
In a lot of, because certain machines will actually control your movement as opposed to you having a movement pattern you're trying to use, and actually being able to find a way to get to that movement. Say you're holding like onto a bar. It's very different to being sometimes locked into a machine that's holding your movement in a certain way. You know, and I think that's what you're saying as well. So like, but what you're saying is that obviously the less intense you make the movement, the more you can put some actual varied bits in it. It's like you could lunge out to the side, or you can get down onto the floor, or you can do stuff that's kind of really relevant, you know, that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think fixed path movements, they're very rigid, they're very one-dimensional, and so it's important to, as Christian was just saying, throw in or sprinkle in some exercises which are multi-planar, sort of work in the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, the transverse plane, getting some rotation in there rather than just sticking to those fixed path movement patterns.
Yeah.
And it just allows you to explore a little bit more and find out where you're weak and where you're imbalanced through using barbells and dumbbells and body weight and resistance bands over machines. But again, not to say that machines are bad, they have their place. But I think there's a lot to be learned from bodyweight training, absolutely.
Yeah, and just encourage people to start out. The good thing is you haven't got to hit the gym.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're all a bit conscious of our own bodies, and when you are starting out, if you know, don't not do resistance. Don't say, well, I can't do resistance exercise because I can't go to a gym.
Yeah.
Because I'm not happy with the way I'm looking. Yeah. Just start doing it, whether it be getting up down out the chairs. Yeah. James on the app does another one where it's just literally going up and down the step, up and down the step in your home.
Human movement.
Yeah.
Human movement. Yeah.
Well done, guys. Thanks for that. I think we've all learnt quite a lot about resistance today.
Yeah, brilliant.